1. Let me preface this by saying, I worked for 5 years as a waitress, barista, cook, and eventually as unofficial assistant manager at a tiny independent suburban cafe. This story happens when I was about 17, after working there for 3 years. At this point, I knew about 75% of our clients by name, and it was extremely rare that I met a client I'd never seen before. We mostly had regulars, and I knew a lot of people in the neighborhood, so it was quite rare, but not impossible, that someone I didn't know at all would stop by. At this point, I was so often the only employee in the cafe on slow days, my boss trusting me entirely, and she deserved a few hours off every once in a while. It was an extremely hot summer afternoon, and also one of those aforementioned slow days. My boss had left right after lunch hour, leaving me alone in the cafe for the 2 to 3 hours to closing time. I had the front and back doors open to try and get a bit of a breeze going, since our AC wasn't very good. We hadn't had a single client since my boss left earlier, and I was getting ready to close shop early when a man I didn't know walked in. He was slightly disheveled, but apart from that, he looked very suburban and average. Striped blue polo, jean shorts, sandy hair. He wanted a smoothie, so I suggested a few popular ones to him, smiling amicably and chatting a bit. He seemed very awkward, answering me with short one-word answers and just overall giving off don't talk to me vibes, so I stopped trying to make small talk as I prepared his order. Handed him his smoothie, and he opened his wallet wide, and pulled out a stack of $20 and $50 bills. I was wondering why in the world this weirdo needed to run around with thousands of dollars in cash, but wasn't too fazed until he fanned his money out, putting it on display for me to see, even though I was weirded out, especially since this entire interaction went down in silence. I didn't say anything and smiled politely as I waited for him to pay. After a few reactionless seconds, he handed me a $20 bill. I gave him his change, and he started to leave. Just as he reached the door, he turned around abruptly and asked me for my number. Startled by the question, since he had been standoffish up until now, and also because he was 10-ish years older than me, and I was a minor who it would be illegal for him to have sex with. I was completely caught off guard and didn't know how to answer, so I awkwardly shook my head no. Although he looked pained, he shrugged and left without another word. With all this, it was definitely time to close up for the day. I washed the dishes I'd used to make the smoothie, mopped the floors, locked the front door, and went out back to throw out the compost. The compost bin was on the other side of a small parking, near some dense bushes, so its odors wouldn't bother any of the neighboring buildings. As I start crossing the lot, I see a flash of movement out of the corner of my eye. Striped blue polo, blonde hair, eyes watching me from the bushes near the compost. I was still near the back door at this point, so I slowly put down the compost on the recycling bin near the door. I didn't want to let on that I had seen him, but I also didn't want to go out to the bushes and discover what the hell he was doing lurking near the cafe's back door. So I moved some things around near the recycling, left the compost on top of the bin, and bolted back to the cafe. I closed and locked the door immediately, and called my dad in a panic. I explained what had just gone down, and he immediately drove to work to pick me up, even though I usually walked home. When he got there, there was no sign of the man in the blue polo. After this incident, I never saw him again, whether at work or around the neighborhood. But my parents or boss drove me home for a few weeks nonetheless. And for the rest of the summer, I wasn't left alone at work. So, creepy suburban 20-something, let's not meet again. 2. To give some background information, this event occurred a little over a year ago, and I still haven't been able to begin to get over it. I'm a 22-year-old 5'4" female, and at the time I was 21. My family and I had recently moved to a new town that was a fair amount more rural than the town I had previously lived in, and our new house was a large ranch-style house with a basement. I was home from college, and my parents had left for the week to celebrate their wedding anniversary with their friends who lived several hours away. Before I continue, I'll give a quick layout of the house so that you'll be able to imagine the setting a bit more clearly. There were 3 doors which led into the house. One on the front porch, a sliding glass door on the back porch, which did have a lock, and floor-length curtains for privacy. And another door on the side of the wall from my bedroom, which led into the garage and basement. When you walk out of my bedroom and turn, you can see all the way across the house, kitchen, living room, dining area, to the door of my parents' bedroom, and the stairs leading up from the basement. It had been a couple of days since my parents left, and I hadn't had any problems. They had sent me a couple messages on Facebook letting me know that they arrived to their friend's house safely and were having a good time. The day had gone well, and I was sure to check that I'd locked all the doors of the house once the sun started to go down. It was about 11 p.m., and I was doing my nightly routine of laying in bed and messing around on the computer, when I suddenly got this sinking feeling of dread. I felt as if I was being watched. It was summer, and we didn't have AC, so I had a large box fan in the window blowing the cool night air into my stiflingly hot room. But once that feeling settled over me, I decided that I should remove the fan and close the window, just in case. Once removing the fan, shutting and locking the window, and pulling down the curtain, I felt a bit better. However, I still couldn't shake the feeling of dread. I lay back in bed and tried to continue what I was doing, though I didn't put my headphones back on. After a few minutes, I began to hear something that sounded like light scratching. I sat still in bed, listening to the sound, trying to pinpoint what it was and if I recognized it at all. Our new house, although relatively close in distance to our neighbors, had a fair amount of forest around it. So I thought the scratching may have been an animal or someone's dog that got loose and wanted to come inside. After a few minutes, the scratching stopped, and everything returned to silence. So I figured that I was probably right and that it must have been an animal. My relief was short-lived, as soon after the scratching stopped. From the other side of the wall, I began to hear slow footsteps descending into the basement. This is when I knew I was completely fucked. There was no way I could get out of the house without walking past the basement stairs. We didn't have a house phone, and at the time I was in the process of getting a new cell phone because mine was broken beyond repair. I sat there for a few seconds, wondering what the hell I should do. I knew that I would need to get out of the house as soon as possible, and that the more time I wasted, the worse it would be for me. I contemplated popping the screen out of my bedroom window and jumping out, but it was far enough off the ground that there was a good chance I would end up getting hurt if I did. Not to mention that if I jumped out the window and hurt myself, I wouldn't be able to run for help, and I would be right next to the door that whoever was in my house had gone in through. So I decided to very carefully and quietly open my door and peek around the corner. And if the coast was clear, I would make a mad dash for the front door and sprint to my neighbor's house. I very slowly opened my bedroom door, letting my eyes adjust to the darkness of the house before creeping around the corner and looking to see if I was safe, to make a run for it. What I saw nearly made me vomit. As my eyes scanned the house, I noticed that something was off. I squinted hard as I looked over the basement stairs and was able to make out the shape of a man. What made it worse, he wasn't just standing at the top of the stairs. He was fucking crawling up them like some kind of nightmare creature. I quickly backed into my room again, shutting and locking the door as quietly as I could. I didn't think he'd seen me, but there was no way that I was going to make a run for it now. My only choice was to pop the screen and jump out the window. As I was unlocking and opening my window, I heard the handle to my bedroom door turn. Once the man realized that it was locked, in a sickeningly sweet sing-song voice he cooed, "I know you're in there." This was followed by a loud cackle, and what I can only imagine was him throwing himself at full force against my door. I ripped the screen out of the window and flung myself out. I landed wrong on my right foot, and I was sure that I'd hurt my ankle, but at the time I couldn't think of anything other than getting as far away as possible. I got up and ran as fast as I could to my neighbor's house, knocking on their door in a panicked frenzy, and ringing the bell over and over. I looked over at my house as I was yelling for my neighbors to let me in, and I swear to fucking God, I could see the man standing at my window, waving at me. My neighbors finally opened the door after what felt like forever, and I managed to explain well enough what was going on for them to let me in and call the police. I stayed with them until the police arrived. The police searched my house and found that the lock to the basement had been picked, and that the door to my bedroom was hanging off the hinges. They weren't able to find the man anywhere, and because I had only seen him for a split second in the dark, I couldn't provide them with a good description of him. Of course, I got into contact with my parents immediately, and they hurried home. The police took my statement and searched the area for the man, but, of course, they came up with nothing. After this event, my parents and I were sure to add deadbolt locks to the door leading into the basement, and to the door leading out of the basement to the rest of the house. They also helped me pay to get a new phone. What really bothers me about all of this is that nothing was stolen. There wasn't even any evidence that the guy had looked through anything while he'd been in my house. So, psycho who broke into my house, knowing that I was home, let's not meet again. 3. Back in late 2006, I was fresh out of high school and starting college life. Country girl in the big city, and all on my own. I met people quickly, made a few friends, and got a job to support myself. That took up most of my time. In no time at all, I was besieged by the plague of the much friend. The person who really needs you to cover the bills this month because insert new reason that makes you the jerk for not helping here. I was brand new to living on my own and thought they really needed my help. So I tightened my belt and worked harder and longer. Pretty soon, though, that was turning into me paying for everything and barely having food. So it was about this time one of the people I had recently met started asking me to go on a blind date with a friend of theirs, named Connor. I said no a few times, but when they said it would just be dinner and a movie, and that Connor would pay, it really piqued my interest. I had been living off ramen noodles for weeks, and an actual meal and something to do other than work sounded really appealing. She swore up one side and down the other that Connor was so nice and so shy and so sweet, and it didn't have to be more than just one date. I asked her why such a great-sounding guy was getting set up on a blind date. At this she faltered, and said that he really seemed to have retreated into his shell since starting college, became hard to talk to, and had been all around odd lately. They thought a nice night out with someone would bring him back out of his shell and help him adjust to the enormous life change that is college. I reluctantly agreed, and she immediately set up a time that very night, as it was my first day off in a while, and we didn't know when I could be free again. Connor responded that he would pick me up outside a local ice cream shop in his red car. This was important since I didn't have a cell phone. So that was how I would know it was him. I went to the ice cream shop, and after being 20 minutes late and starting to feel like I should just walk home, the car pulled up way too close and Connor stepped out. He was around 5'6", with a bowl cut, blonde hair, big round glasses, and a polo shirt. He ran around to my side and opened the door, placing a hand on the small of my back and telling me to get in quick or we would be late. My first red flag had popped up, but I just figured he was a jerk and was happy that I would only be around this guy for a few hours. We started driving and he immediately started asking me questions and wanting to know all about me, and I was happy to oblige, as he was not really adding to the conversation and it felt awkward when no one was talking. I didn't see anything personal, mostly funny stories and anecdotes. I knew better than to give out all kinds of information to someone I just met. After a while, I realized I had no idea where we were. Not in a way you feel when you are in a new city and the streets become unfamiliar, but in a way that I was not sure anymore when the last time I saw streetlights and road signs was. I realized then that he was keeping me talking just as long as possible so I wouldn't notice where he was driving me. I was alone in a car with a guy I didn't know, driving who knows where with no phone, and a bunch of roommates who probably wouldn't notice me missing until the bills were due. I felt like such an idiot, but I knew I had to berate myself after this was over, and needed to get my head in the game now. I decided to play along like I was still oblivious, and asked what movie we were seeing, and what kind of food after, and how he knew my friend who set this date up. Just lots of things to keep him talking and distracted while I looked for a road sign and gently felt for the unlock button on the door. Suddenly, a sign popped up in the distance for a gas station, and I figured I could tuck and roll out of the door and run inside for help, if I could just find the button to unlock the door. Just then the car stopped and Connor threw it into park and jumped out just as someone else jumped into the back driver's side seat. He shut the door and turned to the man in the back seat, which was great for me because I could now look for a button and unlock the door without him noticing. I found the button, quietly pushed it, and pulled the handle, hoping to do this quietly as possible to maybe gain some ground to the gas station before they noticed me. I pulled. No response. I pushed on the door while pulling. No response. I checked the button again and tried again. No movement from the door. It was at this point I realized I wasn't getting out of this car unless it was from the driver's side. All the while this is going on, Connor is having a loud conversation with the guy who jumped in the back, who is apparently his drug dealer. Yeah, suddenly all that stuff about him acting weird since college made a very loud click, and from what I gathered, as I was trying to open the door, Connor had developed quite the habit. Apparently he owed his dealer money for cocaine, and was using me as leverage to hold on to, while he went and got them the money. What the fuck? Luckily, this was full of, "I swear I'm good for it, and I'll be back in a few minutes," repeated several times, and were loud enough to mask my fumbling with the door. Connor ran into the darkness of the woods we parked next to, and it was just me and the dealer in the car. I stared straight ahead, so there would be no problems about me having seen his face later, should it come up. We sat in silence for what felt like forever, and then he says, and I will never forget this, "Hey, honey, want to go out back behind the gas station and blow me for some coke?" I was not sure what to say to this, so I went with my first response, which was a high-pitched and musical, "Oh, thank you." To my unending luck and this man's credit, he proceeded to bust a gut laughing, which made me laugh too. He then said, "Damn, girl, you got like Self-respect and shit. To which I once again didn't know how to respond, so I just shrugged and said, "I try, sir." Which made him belt out a long, loud laugh again, and we both ended up chuckling for a few minutes. He then asked, "What the hell is a chick like you doing with this guy?" I didn't know how to respond, and so far things have been going all right. So I just told him everything I told you. He even asked if I tried to jump out of the car when it stopped, as that would have been the sensible thing, and I told him I tried, but my door didn't seem to open from the inside because, at this point, what have I got to lose by lying? He then said something I really didn't think I'd hear. He said he was sorry. Apparently, ever since college had started a few months ago, he had been going to the same one as Connor, and was dealing on the side to make ends meet until he got his degree, and didn't need to anymore. Connor was from a rich family, and was one of his best clients at first, but spiraled into debt with him quickly, and was hitting this stuff way too hard and fast. Connor was supposed to meet him here to give him the money he was owed. But when he got into the back seat, this guy jumped out of the front, made a million excuses about how the money was coming in just a few minutes, and had ran off into the woods with me still in the car. At this point, I had no idea what was going to happen next, and was about to ask how long we had been waiting, when a hushed argument and stomping sounds became evident from the woods in the direction Connor had run off to. Out pops a much taller guy, dragging Connor along to the car window, and begins breathlessly apologizing for the actions of Connor. He said Connor was an idiot, and this was all a big mistake, and handed the dealer something. I imagine money, as he said it was all there and a little extra, and that Connor would not be bothering him again. The tall guy opened the door for the dealer, who got out, less than happy with these guys, but content with his money. At this point, the big dude introduces himself as this guy's roommate, Kyle. When Connor had come back to the apartment, it had popped a red flag, as he was way too cheerful for someone who had left a few hours prior, shaking at the thought of paying off his dealer. After a little questioning, Connor said he had decided to pick up a girl and leave her in the car with the dealer to pay off his debts. Kyle was rather irate at this, and wanted to know how exactly that was going to pay off anything, and exactly what was wrong with him. Connor said you saw drug dealers take chicks all the time on TV, so this must be a valid form of payment. Kyle then began to beat up Connor, and demand to be taken back to wherever he had dropped off the car right now, but not before making a stop at the ATM for the dealer's money. Connor protested, but Kyle smacked him around a bit until he saw the light and, after making a quick ATM stop, marched him through the woods, back to the car, to pay the dealer and get me home. He told me this while repeatedly hitting Connor in the back of the head as he drove me back to the city, exclaiming things like, "Whatever made you think kidnapping some girl was a good idea?" And, "Did you think you would just magically never see your dealer again? You have a class with him on Monday, dude." He then made Connor apologize as well, and we sat in silence for a while as I wondered how I ever, in a million years, got lucky enough to get kidnapped by a complete idiot, who had the nicest drug dealer on the planet, and a roommate that doubled as an aggressive Jiminy Cricket. They dropped me off as soon as we hit downtown, as I didn't want them to know where I lived. I thanked Kyle profusely as I got out, and he said it would be all good if I promised to never go to the cops about it, since they had futures and whatnot. I said no problem. They drove off, and I walked home to eat my ramen, and never under any circumstances let myself end up like that again. All in all, a great ending, as long as I never meet any of them ever again. Hey everyone, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 3 True Scary Stories, episode 110. Am I a bad person because I was kind of chuckling like mad trying to read that last story when Wiener Boy there, Connor, kept getting beaten up? No, that's okay? Good. Glad we're all in agreement there. Some people just need a good slapping, to be perfectly honest with you. Okay, let's see. Where are we now? This is Sunday. And right. Heading into the next week. Where are we at? Well, tomorrow will be more True Scary Stories. I believe we should be having subscriber stories on Tuesday. True Scary Stories again on Wednesday. Things are looking very promising right now for another glitch video on Thursday. Got 3 so far, just need 2 more at this point. I think that'll be alright. And then the usual paranormal on Friday. I think we'll just be keeping paranormal on Friday. And Saturday at the moment's open, I'm not sure. I usually try for the TIFUs on Saturday, but I might try something a little bit different. I mean, Saturday isn't really one of those days that I have a set thing for, so we'll see if I can come up with anything else. In news, those who are wondering about the Q&A, I've actually recorded it. Got all the questions capped and cropped. I've answered them all. Currently, it's about 29 minutes. I'm sure once I've edited all the rubbish out, it'll probably be about 5. But, well, we'll see once it's done. But it shouldn't be too much longer for that. I just need to find a free half hour or hour, depending on how long it's going to take to put it all together. And when it is, that will go up as a bonus video one day. I think I'm not going to have a set day for it. I think I'm going to drop it like Beyonce. I'll do it when not expected. Then it'll just be there for you to all wake up and discover. Okay, and with that, I think I'll say goodbye for now. So, until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.